The French mystique. Anything glazed with the word French has glamour. French fashion, French cuisine, French art, sculpture, French theater, French literature, and French follies. The French past, the French present, and the French future. At times, the French can be confoundingly individualistic. Every Frenchman clings to his opinion. It's said that if a Parisian wants your opinion, he'll give it to you. But their outlook on life unites them. Living life is an art. It is this French art of living that draws more visitors the world over to France than to any other country. The source of this feisty French individuality is France itself, its diversity, its marked contrasts. France is big, the biggest country in Western Europe. It is bordered on the north by the Kingdom of Belgium and the little Duchy of Luxembourg. On the northwest, it faces the English Channel. On the west, it's a battered shore for the rough Atlantic. On the south, the Pyrenees form a mountainous border with Spain. And moving southeast, the magical Mediterranean is lapping at golden beaches. On the east, the River Rhine cuts a watery border with Germany. And the Alps in all their grandeur straddle France's border with Switzerland. We are embarking on a tour of this remarkable country in all its wonderful variety. Taking you to France's south, Mediterranean France, and the France of the Pyrenees. Ancient mountain villages perched above the sea. Nice, queen city of the world's most famous stretch of beach, the French Riviera. Monaco and the lingering spirit of Princess Grace. The glamour of the world's most famous film festival at Cannes. Marseille, a crossroads of East and West, founded by ancient Greeks. Arles, called the soul of Provence, its sunlight captured in the canvases of Van Gogh. The marshy Camargue, with its half-wild horses and its gypsy festival at Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer. A riotous celebration of new wine in the village of Limoux. And a procession of the faithful at the Shrine of Lourdes. The Basque Country, its people rooted in their folkloric past. We'll take you to the Rhone Valley. Lyon's temples of cuisine, Mâcon. And to Burgundy, crowned by its capital, Dijon. Then into the Loire Valley, studded with chateaux. We'll sweep north, Teutonic France, Colmar in the Alsace, to battle-scarred Verdun. We'll follow the heroic trail of Joan of Arc from her house in Lorraine to the site of her burning in Rouen. This is Norseman's France, Normandy, whose beaches saw the D-Day landings of World War II. We'll visit the sea-whipped abbey of Mont Saint-Michel and Celtic France in the province of Brittany. And on to the city called one of the most noble ornaments of the world, Paris. This astonishing geography, within these broad borders, is what the French call with feeling, La Belle France. France is old, emerging from a long, turbulent history. A history hewn by warriors, from ancient Gallic chiefs to Charles de Gaulle. In southwestern France are found the cave paintings of Lascaux, stags, boars, bulls, going back 20,000 years. And in Brittany, Neolithic man once danced in rituals among these sacred stones. In the busy port of Marseille, this plaque commemorates the city's founding by Greek merchants in 600 BC. 42-year-old Julius Caesar invaded in 58 BC. Ever since, his lengthy account of his conquest has been required reading for students of Latin. At the pass of La Turbie, above Nice, stands the trophy of Augustus, built in 6 BC by the Romans. Indeed, southern France abounds in Roman ruins, some of them, like the arenas at Arles and Nîmes, still in use. After the Caesars fell, France produced a Roman emperor on its own, a Holy Roman Emperor in Charlemagne. The sovereigns of medieval France ranged from holy heroes to depraved cowards. It was from the walled town of Aigues-Mortes in the 13th century that good King Louis IX left for the Crusades. Today he's revered in Aigues-Mortes and throughout the world as Saint Louis, St. Louis. But in the 15th century, the weak, debauched Charles VII could gain the throne only by the inspired prodding of Joan of Arc. The elegant Francis I hastened the Renaissance in France by importing Italian artists and architects. The Sun King, Louis XIV, burst over 17th century France, the most powerful ruler in Europe since the Caesars. And in his palace at Versailles, he enjoyed the most extravagant lifestyle the world has ever seen. In the next century, France threw itself into a revolution that changed the course of history. Heads rolled, including those of Louis XVI and his queen, Marie Antoinette. It is the presence of one French leader, one titan of a man, that vibrates to the present day. From the turbulence that followed the revolution, there emerged a brilliant and wildly ambitious officer from a Corsican family named Bonaparte. With the siege of Toulon, he earned his generalship. In Italy, he routed the Piedmontese and the Austrians. On the deserts of Egypt, he beat the Turks. The grateful French elected him consul for life, and later he crowned himself emperor. With bold strokes, he reorganized the state. His continuing victories made him the most envied and most feared leader in Europe. Then he invaded Russia, Moscow, but the Tsar's capital was burnt to the ground rather than being surrendered. For the first time, Napoleon felt the bitterness of utter defeat. In time, he was forced to abdicate. His domain shrunk to the tiny island of Elba, but he soon rallied his forces and returned to France. Now it took most of Europe to beat him. Prussians, English, Dutch, at Waterloo. He was banished to the island of St. Helena, where he wasted away, probably the victim of an unknown poisoner. There he died, and on that island was buried in a nameless grave. Then in 1840, his remains were returned to France in echoes of remembered glory. Today, echoes of enduring glories resound throughout all of France, from its cathedrals, from its chateaux, from its vineyards, from its agricultural abundance, from its artists, from its sense of fun, its style, its verve, its tenderness. All of these melding into a spirit which makes France so different from any other country in the world. This is France, glorious in its diversity. Our tour begins at France's eastern wall, where the marriage of mountains to the Mediterranean beget the most glamorous stretch of coastline on earth. The French call it the Côte d'Azur. To us, it's the French Riviera, stretching from the Italian border to include the Principality of Monaco. The jewels of the Riviera, Nice, Cannes, Saint-Tropez, and the mountain villages of Saint-Paul-de-Vence and Eau-de-Cagnes. Moving down, on roads carved by the Romans, passing Ville-Perchée, medieval villages perched on these peaks to escape the rape and pillage of centuries of wars. Reachable by rail as well as by air and road, the city of Nice is the resplendent capital of the Côte d'Azur, and now a prime convention center of France. For a traveler, it's the excursion center for the whole stretch of Riviera. The Promenade des Anglais, a broad boulevard fronting the Bay of Angels, sets the tempo. At the turn of the century, British lords and Russian princes made Nice their winter nesting grounds. A favorite nest was the Negresco, so favored by aristocrats that it became known as the Palace by the Sea. So many Romanovs romped here that Tsar Nicholas commanded that a Russian cathedral be built in Nice. After the Bolshevik Revolution, some of those Russian blue bloods returned to Nice penniless to take jobs as bellmen and doormen in hotels such as the Negresco, where they had once resided as pampered guests. But there's an earthy Nice, a Nice of the open market, a Nice of the hardy Niçoise, of the flower market, the non-tourist Nice of an ancient people who couldn't care less about crowned heads. Just 9 miles east of Nice, on a hilly wedge hemmed in by France, lies the second smallest state in Europe. Monaco covers about 3/4 of a square mile. With a population under 30,000, is a picturesque little principality that almost smacks of comic opera. To some, Monaco is gambling at the casino in Monte Carlo, the roulette capital of Europe. But for many, Monaco is Princess Grace, her good works, which made her beloved of the people who live here. Some come to visit the cathedral in which she was married and now lies buried. The daughter of a former bricklayer from Philadelphia, Grace Kelly wore several crowns before Monaco's. As a model, as an Academy Award-winning motion picture queen. In the early 1950s, Prince Rainier III was the world's most eligible bachelor and the most challenged. If he failed to produce an heir, Monaco, over which he reigned, would revert to France. He met the challenge. The prince cast around to Hollywood royalty and wooed Grace Kelly. They were married in St. Nicholas Cathedral in April of 1956. The following year, Princess Grace gave birth to an heir, a daughter. There was rejoicing. Tiny Monaco's independence was assured. She was blessed with 2 more children. When she wasn't mothering, she devoted herself to the welfare of her people. 13 September 1982, Princess Grace with daughter Stephanie was motoring in a sports car on this highway over the wild, magnificent coast. Then, while curving dizzily above Monte Carlo, the car veered out of control. Her daughter Stephanie received neck injuries. Grace died. Princess Grace loved roses. Today in Monaco, a quiet rose garden is her memorial.
What is so special about a rose that it seems more than a flower? Perhaps it is the mystery it has gathered through the ages. Perhaps it is the joy that it continues to give. Grace of Monaco.
Of the perched villages crowning the heights sloping to the sea, Saint-Paul-de-Vence, just 19 miles from Nice, is the best known. A magical medieval town built on a bastion of rock, offering superb views and a bit of history around every corner. But this medieval stronghold heralds the age of modern art, for outside the walls is the Make Foundation's peekaboo playground of a museum, an imaginative intermingling of terraces, galleries, courtyards, and groves of pine. Near Saint-Paul-de-Vence, though far off the beaten path, lies the ancient town of Haut-de-Cognes. Here the great Renoir, whose paintings are loved throughout the world, came to live out his last years. Though his hands were crippled with arthritis, he continued to paint until his death in 1919. Back at Seaside, cosmopolitan Cannes, with its frontage of golden beach and its splendid yacht harbor. Cannes glitters. The palm-lined Promenade de la Croisette curves along the coast. A promenade to the Cannes Palais des Festivals. Hub of the most glamorous film fest on earth. At festival time, the venerable old Carlton Hotel becomes a frenzied pastry shell to cinema confections, artists and starlets and studio moguls. The Alpine foothills slope to the fabled land that the Romans called Provincia. This is Lower Provence, a sensuous land of blue sky and cypress, and an average annual temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit. A land whose sun-infused world was embraced by great artists in Aix-en-Provence and the old Roman town of Arles. A land whose ancient port Marseille is now France's second largest city. Marseille, with a population of almost 1 million, is the greatest port of the Mediterranean and one of the oldest. It was called Massalia by the Greeks who founded it 2,600 years ago. During World War II, Marseille was a port from which refugees fled Hitler's Europe. The kind of desperate refugees who peopled the cast of the classic film Casablanca. Today it's the Mediterranean terminal of the European community. Fishing boats chug into the old harbor with their catch, which in turn, vendors sell on the pier. All morning long, the vendors are shouting out their prices to shoppers. But as the sun gets higher and hotter, the prices get lower. The morning's catch makes up the ingredients for Marseille's gift to the French menu. Bouillabaisse. As a city, Marseille has its unsolved mysteries. One of those mysteries was immortalized by the great French novelist Alexandre Dumas père. When Dumas visited this forbidding old fort, the Chateau d'If, he learned of a prisoner who had been brought here in the 17th century. A prisoner who had been kept unknown and unseen. He was inspired to write one of his best-known works, The Man in the Iron Mask. Yes, this prisoner did live, his face forever concealed in a mask. To this day, no one has been able to find out who he was. 55 miles northwest of Marseille, on a wedge of land where the Rhone River branches, lies the small city of Arles. From its Place de la République to its warm, vibrant people, whose native Latin-rooted language, Provençal, is older than French, and whose customs go back to antiquity, Arles is the soul of Provence. Founded by Caesar, Arles was known in the ancient world as the Little Rome of the Gauls. The old Roman arena, dating from the 1st century AD, holds more than 20,000 and is still in use. These children are rehearsing for a pageant native to Provence. There are people who have never visited France, but know the sights of Arles through the paintings of an artist much loved in our day, Vincent van Gogh. Attracted by the dazzling light of Provence, Van Gogh came to Arles in 1888 and settled in a yellow house with a small white studio. His dream of painters sharing quarters and working together came true. Fellow artist Paul Gauguin arrived and shared digs with him. But they quarreled, and Vincent threatened Gauguin with a razor. And it was in Arles that Vincent cut off his own ear. Van Gogh produced some of his greatest works in Arles, hundreds of pictures. During his lifetime, he lived like a pauper and sold only one of his numerous canvases. Today, his works are valued at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. The border of the province of Languedoc reaches southeast of Arles, melding with that of Provence in the Rhone Delta, where salt and fresh water meet in an area of sandbars and seagrass known as the Camargue. Here in muddy marshes, flocks of flamingos find refuge. Here black bulls are bred for the arenas of Arles and Nîmes. Here small half-wild horses roam freely. They are said to have been brought to the Camargue by Moors from North Africa. The chief town here is Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer. To gypsies, a place of religious pilgrimage. Gypsies congregate here from all over Europe. West of the Rhone lies the marvelous old province of Languedoc. With Carcassonne, its medieval castle town, so perfectly preserved. And to the south, the pilgrimage town of Lourdes, the Basque country in the Pyrenees. To the north, the vineyards of Bordeaux. In the province of Bordeaux, there are more than 100,000 vineyards that produce some 70 million gallons of wine a year. But wine is more than production here. In Bordeaux, wine is a ritual, almost a religion. More than half the table wine of France comes from Languedoc. The people of the town of Limoux are engaged 12 months of each ripening year in viticulture. Each bottle produced and lovingly corked and labeled, contributing to the town's pride, as well as its economy. Then comes Carnival. The new wine, the year's work, is ready for drinking. Come revels, and a wine carnival explodes in Little Limoux. Sons and daughters of the granite warriors of Languedoc make war with confetti. It's a procession pulsing to the beat of some dimly remembered pagan rite. But south to the rolling green foothills of the Pyrenees, there's a far from pagan procession, composed of the faithful from the world over at the town of Lourdes. This shrine was built around a spring discovered over a century ago by a peasant girl named Bernadette Soubirous, whose family was so poor that it lived in this abandoned jail. When she was 14, she beheld the vision of a lady, a beautiful lady, at a grotto. From the ground nearby, a spring erupted, beginning a series of cures believed to be miraculous. Lourdes became a place of pilgrimage. As for Bernadette, she entered a convent where she died in 1879. Her body lies there in a remarkable state of preservation. The sainted girl's story has been recounted in a best-selling novel which became a film classic, The Song of Bernadette. Today, Lourdes is one of the most visited and most beloved shrines in Christendom. Straddling the border between Spain and France, the Pyrenees hold what the French call Le Pays Basque, Basque country. The Basques are a strong and independent people. thus speak a language unrelated to any other in Europe, and cling stubbornly to their folkloric ways. We travel north to the very heart of France with its great rivers. The mighty Rhone coursing from Geneva to the Mediterranean. In the Rhone Valley, the city of Lyon, breeding ground of the great French chefs. The River Saône meanders through wine towns such as Mâcon and flows through Burgundy's splendid old capital, Dijon. The Loire is France's longest river, flowing westward to the sea. Between the cities of Orléans and Angers rolls the Loire Valley, studded with chateaux. Lyon is France's third largest city. Its fame rests on its marionettes and its restaurants. Indeed, Lyon is the country's cuisine capital. It is here that students of cookery strive for the knighthood of culinary honors, the cordon bleu. If, as they say, the French are the world's best-fed people, then the citizens of Lyon are the best fed of the French. Traveling north through the vineyards of the famous white Burgundy wines, we pause at Mâcon, straddling the border between Burgundy and Lyonnaise. This is a wine town whose name on a label is music to the lovers of fine vintages. For centuries, Dijon was the capital of the feisty, independent Dukes of Burgundy. Today, it is the capital of a wine-laced mustard that bears its name. Its ancient cathedral is roofed in the colors of Burgundy's great oak-aged wines, its sunny Chardonnays, its purple Chambertons, and Vougeots. This cathedral, which began as a 13th century abbey church, is pure, elegant Gothic. Burgundy's dukes once held power rivaling that of the kings of France. It's said that in hours of weariness, when one bends under the weight of living, one should come and rest in this enchanted cathedral. To the west, the Loire Valley, the Garden of France. From royal hunts centuries ago, falcons were released to soar above this verdant valley, fairy tale castles, weaving a tapestry of old France. Kings and counts frolicked here. Here they hunted, loved, plotted, and assassinated. Sometimes they even governed. Lovely Chenonceau is a palace of pleasure rather than a fortress. 16th century Villandry Chateau was restored by an American heiress from Philadelphia. Visitors flock to see its rigorously geometrical gardens. Chambord is the most spectacular of the chateaux and the most fanciful. These towers and turrets, cupolas and chimneys form a fantasy in limestone. Chambord exudes royal luxuries. King Francis I used Chambord as a hunting lodge. And the nearby forest still rings of the spirit of the chase. Today, these private castles are public, and 5 gallant centuries of the Loire are relived. Touring north from Colmar in the Alsace on the River Rhine and sweeping westward through the agricultural province of Lorraine. Verdun, a name branded on history by World War I. We follow the trail of Joan of Arc from her birthplace in Domremy-la-Pucelle to the cathedral city of Reims, to Rouen, capital of Normandy. Beyond Rouen, Bayeux, gateway to the D-Day beaches of World War II. The Rhine separates the province of Alsace from Germany's Black Forest. This is Teutonic France, beer and sauerkraut France, yet passionately French. The narrow, twisting streets and half-timbered houses of Old Colmar are typical of Alsatian towns. Auguste de Bartholdi was born in Colmar. It was Bartholdi who created the Statue of Liberty. The neighboring province of Lorraine is peaceful, serene. But in the Great War of 1914-18, its soil was blood-soaked. The Lorraine city of Verdun is a fortress town that goes back to the Romans. It was in this city almost 1,200 years ago that the realm of Charlemagne was split up into what is roughly France and Germany of today. But to those who remember World War I, Verdun is another name for senseless slaughter. A bronze sculpture by Rodin commemorates the sufferings of Verdun. This city is the base from which to visit the battlefields of the Great War of 1914 to 1918. In those years, these fields were scarped for trench warfare. French-held Verdun was vital to both sides. The Kaiser's Germans launched a massive attack. French General Pétain held firm. They shall not pass. They didn't. Today, foliage masks those hellish trenches. The battle raged from February to July of 1916. It is estimated that the number of dead on both sides is 800,000. Lorraine abounds in shrines to fallen heroes, and the Lorraine countryside holds a shrine to the most splendid hero of France. The village of Domremy-la-Pucelle has a population of around 300 souls. Almost 600 years ago, a girl of hearty peasant stock, like these bathers here, grew up in this tiny village, so easily overlooked by tourists. In this house in 1412, she was born, one of 5 children of Isabelle and Jacques of Arc. She was baptized Joan. An old prophecy foretold of France's fall to a foreign power and its redemption by a simple maid from Lorraine. When Joan was 13, at a spot marked by this plaque, she heard a call from God. Thereafter, voices spoke to her, telling her that France was enslaved. She must save the uncrowned king. She, Joan, must free the kingdom of France. Clad in armor and driven by her voices, Joan led France to victory after victory over her country's English masters. It was in the neighboring province of Champagne, at the Cathedral of Reims, sacred site of the crowning of French kings since time immemorial, that in Joan's presence at last, the king was crowned. Tracing the life of Joan to its sad end takes us to Rouen, where Joan of Arc was delivered to her enemies. Rouen was William the Conqueror's capital. It is still the capital of Normandy. A traffic-free mall in the old part of the city. It is called the Big Clock Street after this ornate Renaissance clock. In the old market rises a stone shaft. It marks the spot where on the 30th of May in 1431, Joan of Arc, was burned at the stake as a witch. Even those who burned her knew that it was without cause. Her accusers attributed her astounding victories to the devil. Joan had been tempted to give in to them in order to save herself, but in the end, she could not. She could not deny her voices, so she was put to the fire. Within sight of Rouen's great cathedral, with one of the tallest spires in France, Joan's ashes were thrown into the River Seine to be carried to the Île-de-France, to Paris, to France's heart. It's been 10 centuries since the Norse seafarers swarmed into Normandy and stayed to turn this sea-pounded province into a land of apples and thatched cottages and of pastures that are the prime source of the famous Norman cheeses, such as Camembert. But the saga of Normandy is still written by the sea. Normandy looks over a narrow sleeve of treacherous gray water. The French call La Manche, the English Channel. On the other side stand the chalky cliffs of Dover. The city of Bayeux is renowned for its treasured 230-foot tapestry. Here, stitch by stitch, visitors can trace William the Conqueror's stubborn crossing of the Channel in 1066 to invade England. There are those in Normandy today who lived through another invasion, when France bore the yoke of Nazi occupation. They well remember D-Day of World War II. In June of 1944, the greatest armada the world had ever known, warships, landing craft, jeeps, men, crossed the Channel from English shores to invade Normandy. Norman beaches bristled with German guns, for Normandy was part of the Atlantic wall of Hitler's fortress, Europe. 185,000 allies slogging through surf to beaches raked by enemy fire. Americas landed on beaches codenamed Omaha and Utah. Often with feelings of gratitude, visitors come to pay their respects at these battleground beaches. Now the twisted barriers of German defense, hedgehogs, concrete pillboxes are still. High over Omaha Beach, an American cemetery studded with 9,385 graves. Brothers from 33 different families and a father and son lie side by side. This D-Day cemetery attracts 2 million visitors a year. In tribute to those who died, a bronze colossus within a colonnade memorializes the spirit of American youth. At its base, the opening stanza of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It brings to mind the third verse of that great hymn. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he lived to make men holy, let us die to make men free. Where the provinces of Normandy and Brittany meet and together confront the sea, rises the awesome Mont Saint-Michel. West of it lies Brittany itself, France's western frontier, jutting into the Atlantic. Carnac, Saint-Malo, The Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel stands on a rock of sheer granite 250 feet high. It was begun by Saint Humbert in 708 as a place of prayer. Now it is an encrusted mass of medieval walls and bastions, and a village clustering at its base. 3 days after the new moon and the full moon, high tide, rushing in as fast as a galloping horse, floods the surrounding flats with up to 40 feet of water. Mont Saint-Michel is one of the great sightseeing attractions of Europe. Buttressing the eastern landmass against the sea's fury is the coast of Brittany, stark and wild. This is the France of mysterious stone rings, of dolmens, of menhirs, where prehistoric people enacted sacred rituals. This is Celtic France, the France of Druids, of the legendary Tristan and Isolde. Bretons speak a language akin to Welsh. The Breton seaside town of Saint-Malo was the home of Jacques Cartier, the explorer who claimed much of eastern North America for France. He named it Canada. Aggrandized by its vibrant south, steeped in antiquity, its north with its Norseman's land and its Flanders, its Celtic east and Teutonic west. The Ile-de-France midwives the life of this land. Ile-de-France, dazzling in its chateau. And unsurpassable in its city of light. This model shows a Gallic settlement on an island in the River Seine, surrounded by forest and swamp. The Romans who conquered this settlement called it Lutetia, meaning Mudville. Today, Mudville has grown to become the dream metropolis of this world, Paris. Its landmark, the Eiffel Tower, the world's most recognizable structure. Indeed, it has become the unofficial emblem of France. This is Heads Up Paris, a structure that rose in an age of faith in iron, 7,000 tons of iron. It was built in the centennial year of the French Revolution, 1889, by Gustave Eiffel, an engineer of great skill and imagination. Haughty Parisians hated it. An iron monster, they gasped, the world's biggest lamppost. But in lancing the Paris skyline, Monsieur Eiffel's tower unhorsed these earthbound critics and won ordinary people like a champion. In the early 1900s, it challenged daredevils, and sometimes just simple fellows like this Paris tailor, who had tailored himself a flying suit. Wearing it, he is determined to fly from the third tier of the Eiffel. Below, a crowd watches breathlessly. He hesitates. He shuts his eyes, then flies with a downward thud. His landing makes a hole half a foot deep. Since then, city authorities have forbidden daredevil stunts. But it's the everyday, look-sharp Paris that most intrigues us. Here, the Ile de la Cité, the very cradle of the city. And rising from it, in Gothic majesty, the Cathedral of Notre Dame. This is the heart of Paris. Indeed, some say the heart of France herself. From this square, known as Parvis, are calculated distances from Paris to all parts of France. Notre Dame, its spires, its magnificent rose windows, its famous flying buttresses, form a great history book of Paris, of kings and of commoners, of saints and sinners. For those willing to climb to the roof, there's hobnobbing with gargoyles. Paris is an easy blending of its past, its present, and its future. Near the site of the Bastille, that notorious prison stormed by a mob on the 14th of July of 1789, beginning the French Revolution, stands a new futuristic opera house. The old Paris Opera, now a temple of dance and music, is grandiose. A glittering staircase leads to a world of bygone elegance, a world of legendary music. Among other things, this is the setting for that perennial melodrama, The Phantom of the Opera. Underground Paris, too, has its place in literature. A climactic scene of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables takes place in the Paris sewers. There are underground quarries where, in 1786, the bones of several million dead were moved from overcrowded cemeteries. During World War II, these catacombs were headquarters for the French underground. Now, thousands of tourists explore them every year. The city's grand boulevards begin at the Madeleine, a Grecian temple for the army of Napoleon, converted into a church. This is a starting place for a Parisian promenade. Get the feel of Paris through the soles of your feet. This is a town for strolling. The flower market, riverside bookstalls, the bird market, high fashion, designer elegance of Faubourg Saint-Honoré. At number 15 Place Vendôme stands the hotel that other posh hotels are judged by, the Ritz. When I dream of afterlife in heaven, said Ernest Hemingway, the action always takes place in the Paris Ritz. Stretching for almost a half mile, the Louvre was begun in the 13th century. But its entrance is strictly contemporary. Most first-time visitors head straight for the three ladies of the Louvre. Venus de Milo, who lost her arms. The Winged Victory, who lost her head. And Mona Lisa, who has lost none of her radiance since Leonardo da Vinci graced her with a final brushstroke. Not all of Paris's museums are cavernous old palaces. The Pompidou Center is exoskeletal. The structure is inside out. The Pompidou is bold. It's youthful, futuristic. Yet the antics performed in its broad plaza smack of nothing so much as old-time vaudeville. Strolling through the Tuileries Gardens to the Place de la Concorde. With its 3,000-year-old Egyptian obelisk. During the French Revolution, this is where the guillotine stood. You can still lose your life on this spot if you're a pedestrian. Roaring traffic has replaced the guillotine. Strolling down the Champs-Élysées is a promenade for all seasons. Spring, summer, winter. This broad boulevard radiates from the Place de l'Étoile, which has been renamed in honor of Charles de Gaulle. The Arch of Triumph is imperial, built to commemorate Napoleon's victories. But to those who know and love the city, this arch is the triumph of Paris. Beneath the arch, an unknown soldier lies buried. A flame marks his grave. The Rive Gauche, the left bank of Paris, breeds its own kind of magic. Here in the 13th century, schools sprang up. They became the University of Paris, the Sorbonne. Since Latin was the language heard here, on the streets as well as in the classrooms, the district became known as Le Quartier Latin, the Latin Quarter. The name stuck. It still thrives in a warren of medieval streets, now clustered with ends-of-the-earth cafes, cinemas, clubs. The Rive Gauche is its own universe, invoking endless expectation, energy, and fun. Cutting a swath through the medieval maze is stylish Boulevard Saint-Germain, named after Paris's oldest church. Just across the street is the legendary Eau du Magot. This is a cafe once frequented by artists and writers fomenting new ideas. Sartre, Camus, Picasso. This and the nearby Café de Flore. Crowded left bankers find space to stretch in the Luxembourg Gardens and breathe the sweet air, and then stroll perhaps to one of the left bank museums. The Musée d'Orsay, a superb art museum in a restored railway station. Or the Rodin Museum. It is housed in this 18th century mansion where the great sculptor lived and worked. This was his studio, and his works spill out into these lovely gardens. But this is the left bank's greatest museum, the Hôtel des Invalides, the greatest war museum in the world, and a final resting place for France's military heroes. Among them, Napoleon I. Directly beneath the dome, Napoleon's remains lie in a tomb of red porphyry on a pedestal of green granite. The city rises to its highest point at a butte on its northern rim, the Montmartre. Crowning the hilltop, the Sacré-Cœur, its gleaming white dome peering proudly over the city. The Sacré-Cœur Basilica was built from contributions by the poor as well as the rich after France's defeat by the Prussians in 1870. Townsfolk, tourists, vagabonds, and backpackers stake out top steps for the view. With its characters and its cabarets, Montmartre is an endless come-as-you-are party. At one time, Picasso lived here. Modigliani and Braque had studios here. It is at night that Montmartre makes magic. From here, the city of light sparkles like a jewel. It's a city transformed by night. The landmark of nostalgia for remembered Paris, old-time Paris, has been a windmill turned cabaret, the Moulin Rouge. An artist from a noble family, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, who painted for the kiosk, made the Moulin Rouge a world attraction. The Paris of Lautrec, of the Third Republic, when a French soldier's uniform included bright red pantaloons. And gentlemen still settled disputes honorably, with duels. Lautrec's Paris was the Paris of the Belle Époque, that glittering time span from the 1890s to World War I. Paris was the most cultivated capital, the most stylish, the most relaxed, and the most romantic of cities. It gloried in the arts. Caruso electrified audiences in the great opera house. Sarah Bernhardt, the Divine Sarah, captivated audiences in the theater. This was Gay Paris. Of music halls, where young Maurice Chevalier got his start. And of cabarets. Here, Paris became Risqué Paris. However, the city's naughty reputation did nothing to discourage tourism. Then the can-can was considered the naughtiest of dances. In modern times, the old windmill turned neon. But the can-can, immortalized by Toulouse-Lautrec, was still being danced. Tourists do like the Parisians do, and day trip to a noted church or chateau in the fertile countryside the city nestles in. Take Malmaison. It's only 10 miles out of town. This elegant 17th century country house is where Napoleon lived with his Josephine. It is perfumed with memories of their marriage. In Napoleon's words, Josephine was the sweet and incomparable love of my life. In 1883, Claude Monet, the Impressionist painter, moved into this house at Giverny, less than an hour's drive from Paris. Visitors can stroll through his dreamlike gardens. For 43 years, Monet lived and worked here. He was a painter of light, the look and feel of light at different times of day, in different seasons. No paintings are more beloved than Monet's water lilies, still blooming in the garden pond at Giverny. Versailles, 13 miles southwest of Paris. It took 50 years and more than 30,000 workmen for Louis XIV, the Sun King, to build this grandiose palace. Versailles has been called the greatest living museum of a vanished life on the face of the earth. Nothing rivals it for grandeur. The gardens alone covered 250 acres. During the glory days, there were 1,400 working fountains, requiring as much water as the whole of Paris at the time. And the king imported 4 million flower bulbs every year from the Dutch, when he wasn't at war with Holland. During the bicentennial celebration of the French Revolution, Versailles' courtyards echoed once again with royal pomp. The kings had kept 9,000 soldiers here. 1,000 courtiers and 4,000 servants lived in the palace, which, magnificent as it is, had no sanitation facilities and was next to impossible to heat. Despite the arrogance of its kings and the excesses of its revolution, France is a special place to North Americans. The French have left their imprint on whole regions of Canada, Cartier, and of the United States, Marquette, Joliet. For most U.S. citizens, Lafayette, hero of the American Revolution, is the favorite Frenchman. The French, too, had their favorite American. As America's envoy, Ben Franklin was so popular that silhouette cutouts of him were sold on Paris street corners. Here at number 56 Rue Jacot in Paris, on September 3rd of 1783, Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay negotiated the peace treaty with Britain that ended the Revolutionary War. France was the first country to recognize the independence of the United States. Americans in Paris helped make the 1920s roar. Composer George Gershwin lived here in 1928. Here, while composing An American in Paris, he assembled an array of taxi horns for effects. Shedding her second-class citizenship in the U.S. of the 20s, Josephine Baker stunned Paris with her talent. She remained a headliner in France for 50 years. Josephine Baker died in 1975, and at the Place de la Madeleine was given the biggest funeral for an American ever seen in Paris. After The Great Gatsby was published, F. Scott Fitzgerald lived here with his wife Zelda in 1925. It was a summer, confessed Scott, of 1,000 parties and no work. In 1927, William Faulkner took up digs here, near the Luxembourg Gardens. He wrote his mother, "I have a nice room just around the corner from the Luxembourg Gardens where I can sit and write and watch the children." Gertrude Stein, who coined the phrase "the lost generation," was born in Pennsylvania, but lived most of her life in France. She lived here with Alice B. Toklas from 1938 until her death in 1946. During the Nazi occupation, Gestapo agents ransacked her apartment. Coming across portraits by Picasso, they labeled them degenerate trash. In 1926, Ernest Hemingway moved to number 6 Rue Férou. Here he worked on the novel A Farewell to Arms. Hemingway made his way frequently to the Rue de l'Odéon and the bookshop owned by the American Sylvia Beach. It was called Shakespeare and Company, and at the time occupied number 12. Others came to borrow books. Sometimes Hemingway came to borrow money. To the French, the American who peaked in popularity was an airmail pilot, a stunt pilot, named Charles A. Lindbergh. On May 20th, 1927, he took off from New York's Roosevelt Field in a single-engine plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. He flew without radio contact, without sleep. 33 hours later, he landed safely at Le Bourget Airport near Paris. He was Lucky Lindy now, and the French went wild. Without French money and French blood, America might never have won its independence. In 2 world wars, America has reciprocated. Lafayette, we are here, completing a historic connection between the 2 republics. But never has that connection been demonstrated more movingly than in Paris at the 200th year celebration of the French Revolution. It was the 14th of July, Bastille Day, the climax of the bicentennial. Paris was aglow. From the joyous throngs there arose a voice, a great voice, in the French national anthem. France had chosen an American soprano, Georgia-born Jessie Norman, to render La Marseillaise. Yes. Vive la France.